Alright, so I'm going to start my series of videos on talking about cutting mechanics today, and the first thing we're going to talk about is the idea of cutting through the target as being your basic concept of how to throw cuts that are intended to inflict maximum damage. So, there are roughly two ways in which I can throw a cut, with obviously a spectrum in between them of cutting to center here versus cutting all the way through the target. And when we're training specifically cutting mechanics, we want to make sure that we're cutting through the target. The idea is basically that if I only train to cut to here, then I am training to fail at the cut. And again, as I said in my preface video, there are scenarios where, that's the right thing to do. I'm not arguing that particular point, but when we're throwing a cut whose objective is to inflict previous fight-ending damage, then cutting all the way through is what's necessary for that cut to succeed. So, what we're talking about as step one of training this is doing something like this. So, last time I checked, it was possible to hear that whistling noise that the sword makes on the video here. Hopefully that remains true. And that's also one of the good indicators that you can use as to whether or not the cut's working well in various other mechanics. So, I throw my cut, and then I stop and I look down at my hand position. And that's the key part about how you practice this on your own that's going to add to its usefulness. The idea of looking at your hand position when you're done throwing the cut. Early on, you're going to do this every single repetition. You're going to eventually work your way up to only checking periodically. And you may eventually reach a point where you can sort of feel whether or not it's in the right position or not, but don't expect that to come even remotely early. And what you're looking for when you look for the hand position at the end of the cut is that the plane of the blade is still in the same plane that the cut proceeded through all the way through the target. Right? It's very easy to end up with positions where you start to curl your hand, especially sorts of scooping the cut actions. And we want to make sure that you also finish with your sword entirely through the action. Again, step one of our training process here. And we're going to do this for all 7 of our cuts. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All of these are full shoulder cuts, full arc of motion. Again, this is our early stages of training. So, what's going on when I throw a cut like that? One of 3 possible things is going on. One is that I hit my opponent. This is the ideal, obviously, and this is where the benefits of training this way are most obvious, which is that I'm going to do that significant, meaningful cut that is likely to end the fight promptly with this action here. One of the other options is that one of the other possibilities is that my opponent successfully parries my attack, all right? In which case I'm forced to stop in a position like this, as opposed to my expending energy to stop my sword in a position like that. The benefits of this full cut-through sort of mechanic there are twofold in this place. One, it encourages your opponent to fully commit to their parry because it requires it. 2, you may blow through their parry if their parry is not good enough. Now, there is a question of, okay, well, do I commit so much to this action that it gets parried that I can't then do a follow-on action? Well, I'm going to address that in a second, but this idea of overcommitment versus full commitment. Our objective is full commitment without overcommitment. The third possible scenario when I throw my cut with this full action is that my opponent does something tricky, or I just miss, and my sword goes to the air like that because my opponent is voiding backwards, or again, I've just missed. In that case, the advantage of the full cut-through mechanic is that I do not leave my arm out in an exposed position, where an opponent who had done a void mechanic with the intention of striking at the shallow target of my arm doesn't have that target available to them, and so their void, their slip, an attack action is made more difficult and a little more challenging by the need to hit a deep target because I didn't leave them the shallow target. Again, not guaranteeing that if your opponent successfully tricks you and you get hit, well, your opponent successfully tricked you and you got hit. I can't solve that simply with cutting mechanics. So, the most common criticism that I encounter when I'm talking about this sort of mechanics is the assumption that it constitutes overcommitment. So I want to very clearly distinguish overcommitment from full commitment, because I want only full commitment, and when I see overcommitment in my students, I work to correct it. So, this is going to be most easily viewed from the side here. The idea here is that I'm going to cut to here, okay? I finish in this sort of a position, with the modification that if I'm doing something like a lunge, it's here, okay? What I'm specifically avoiding doing is a few things. This sort of lean into it, all right, which I can also do at the end of a lunge. That would constitute overcommitment as opposed to full commitment, is the sort of thing I would correct. One of the other sorts of things that you can have is this sort of lean or twist away from this where the whole body follows the sword motion. Again, that's definitely a form of overcommitment. It's one of those things that when you see cutting videos online of people who don't do any fencing at all and just do cutting with sharps, it's a frequent mistake that you see in that scenario that would be corrected with good coaching, but doesn't have any price to it in that scenario. So again, that would constitute overcommitment. We want to correct that to a proper level of commitment. The last idea of sort of what constitutes overcommitment would be finishing with my point all the way behind like this. There's some reasonable argument to be like certain kinds of combo actions are done with this sort of emotion. We'll leave that aside for the purposes of this discussion at this level, and just give the idea that this position where my point is still in this front arc is what I'm aiming for achieving, as opposed to a position where I'm all the way back here. This brings us to sort of the next stage of how we approach cutting this, which is immediately coming back onto guard, because of course that's what we need to do if we're still in range in that third scenario where I miss or my opponent avoids. So you train those full cuts as isolated actions first, then you start adding in components like coming right back onto guard. And the more technically demanding action, but that's also our training objective. If we move the bar up, as we succeed at one stage, we move the bar up a little bit, we get a little bit higher, and so on. Okay. The other thing we can do is start working on making that arc smaller. So my arc only needs to actually be as wide as my target is. Okay, that's what's sufficient for cutting through. And we start off cutting from this very large arc, this 180 degree sort of arc. And we want to be able to shrink it down to something much smaller, like this. Hopefully the whistle is still apparent on the video here. I'm going to try this just a handful more times just to make sure. So when you get good at this, you reach a point where you don't need to do the full motion here that we started off with, and you reach a point where you instead do just this. And once we reach the point where we're doing just that, this idea of coming right back onto center afterwards, and this being a small motion that's going to apply better tactically, should hopefully be more apparent. And that's, again, our training objectives that we work our way up to while maintaining good, successful cutting mechanics. So, there is a point about the alternative sorts of tactics of cutting to center with the intention of delivering a thrust. That's a valid tactic. I'm not dismissing it as a tactic. Whatever tactical choices you make, you should be thinking about what are its advantages, what are its disadvantages. How might my opponent take advantage of it? How do I spot that my opponent is going to take advantage of it? How do I minimize the ability of my opponent to take advantage of it? But that's true for any possible tactical choice. There's no single, this always works kind of technique. There's no single, this always works kind of strategy. And it's the awareness of that, the incorporation of that awareness into your training that's going to produce better results than any attempt to produce like the one best way to do this. So that being said, if you are doing a more cut to center kind of mechanic, I will point out, I apologize if this is redundant to anyone, that the idea I would suggest is more cut to an opposition position where you're across the line just a little bit and are therefore safer in the direction from which you've thrown your cut than simply to this dead center position where you can both get hit at the same time. Two dead idiots, we don't want that. I do want to distinguish this sort of center position from a cut from something like coming into a medium guard as you approach your opponent. I'm not commenting on that. And so like, you know, if I'm out of range and I come into range like this here, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking specifically about the mechanics of where you have found the correct distance when you're throwing the cut. Are you throwing the cut all the way through or just to center? Thank you. And as always, I appreciate comments, questions, feedback, and would be happy to discuss this topic. Thank you.